My name is Rachel Turner. I'm 29 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. 2 years ago, I thought I finally had what every daughter wants. A family that accepted me, a home that felt safe, a place where I belonged. I was wrong. If you had told me back then that the woman who called herself my new mother would stand in my father's living room, point at the front door, and tell me to pack my bags from a house she didn't even own, I would have laughed in your face. But that's exactly what happened. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea one forgotten document was about to destroy every plan she'd made. This is the story of how I lost my father, gained a stranger for a stepmother, and discovered a secret about my own home that changed everything. Growing up, it was just me and my dad, Robert. My mother passed away when I was 12, and after that, it was the two of us against the world. My dad worked long hours as a contractor, and in his spare time, he built our house, literally, with his own hands, board by board, weekend by weekend. That house wasn't just a building to us, it was every memory we had left of our small, broken, beautiful little family. When I turned 24, my dad remarried. Her name was Linda. At first, I wanted to be happy for him. He deserved companionship. He deserved someone to grow old with. Linda seemed pleasant enough in the beginning, polite at dinners, complimentary about my work, careful around my father, but I had no idea what was underneath that polite smile. The first sign came quietly, the way these things always do. Linda started making small comments about updating the house, suggesting my old bedroom become a home office, mentioning almost casually that a house this size was a lot for just 3 people. It didn't stop there. She slowly began removing family photos from the hallway, replacing them with pictures of herself and my father. My mother's favorite chair suddenly disappeared into storage. Even little things changed. She stopped calling it our house and started calling it my home. Every change was small enough to dismiss on its own. Together they painted a picture I didn't want to believe. Then came the comments about my father's will. Nothing direct, just little questions dressed up as concern. Robert, have you thought about what happens to the house if something happens to you? Don't you think Rachel should have her own place by now? I told myself I was overreacting. My dad brushed it off too. She's just adjusting, he'd say. Give her time. I wish I had noticed the signs earlier. 18 months into the marriage, my father had a stroke. He survived, thank God, but he needed months of rehabilitation, and during that time, Linda took over everything. The finances, the paperwork, the decisions. I was so focused on my father's recovery that I didn't stop to ask what documents she was having him sign in his hospital bed, exhausted and medicated. That's when everything changed. The moment my father was discharged and settled at a rehab facility for continued care, Linda called me into the living room, the same living room my father had built with his own hands, and told me, without blinking, that things were going to be different now. "Rachel," she said, arms crossed, standing in the doorway like she already owned the place. "I think it's time you found your own apartment. This house isn't yours anymore. It's mine and your father's, and honestly, it's time you grew up and moved out." I stood there in complete shock. This was the house I grew up in, the house where my mother's ashes were scattered in the backyard garden, the house my father built room by room after losing the love of his life. "Pack your bags," she said flatly. "You have 30 days. That night, I packed one cardboard box, just one. I couldn't bring myself to pack the rest. Every shelf, every photograph, every scratch on the wooden floor carried a memory of my parents. Leaving didn't feel like moving out. It felt like burying my family for a second time. I didn't argue that night. I just sat on my bed and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I was scared of losing a roof over my head, but because it felt like I was losing my father, piece by piece, to a woman who saw our home as nothing more than property to be claimed. What happened next still shocks me. The next morning, still shaken, I drove to my father's old filing cabinet in the garage, the one Linda never bothered to touch, because to her, it was just boring paperwork. That's where I found it. Years before Linda ever entered our lives, my father had done something I never knew about. After my mother passed away, grieving and terrified of losing everything, he had transferred the deed of the house into a family trust, with me listed as the primary beneficiary. Not Linda, me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to read the first page 3 times before the words finally sank in. Then I noticed my father's signature and the date. It had been signed years before Linda ever came into our lives. She hadn't stolen my home. She had simply never realized it was never hers to take. He'd done it quietly, years earlier, to protect our family home no matter what happened to him. Linda had spent the last 30 days confidently telling me to pack my bags. From a house she never actually owned, I sat on that garage floor holding the trust documents, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't crying from heartbreak. I was calm, focused, and absolutely certain about what I needed to do next. I didn't want revenge out of anger. I wanted the truth out in the open, for my father's sake as much as mine. I called our family lawyer, Mr. Davies, who had helped my father set up the trust years ago. He confirmed everything. The deed was legally mine, held in trust, completely separate from whatever assets Linda believed she had married into. She has no legal standing to remove you from that property, he told me. In fact, legally speaking, she's the one who may need permission to stay. Over the next 2 weeks, while Linda continued planning her little renovation of my old bedroom and casually mentioning apartment listings to me at dinner, I quietly prepared everything with Mr. Davies. We scheduled a formal meeting, the reading of the trust documents, at the house, with my father present. Linda thought it was simply a legal checkup related to my father's recovery. She had no idea what was actually about to happen. I visited my father at his rehab facility that week, gently explaining what I'd found. His face went pale, then filled with guilt. "I should have told you about the trust," he said, holding my hand. "I never thought it would come to this." "It's okay, Dad," I told him. "Let's just make sure the truth comes out the right way." The day of the meeting, Linda walked into the living room in full confidence, expecting to discuss updating some paperwork. Instead, she found my father, myself, and Mr. Davies sitting at the table with a folder of documents. Mr. Davies calmly explained the trust, that the house had been legally protected in my name years before Linda entered the picture, and that any changes to residency or ownership required my consent, not the other way around. I watched Linda's face change from confusion to disbelief to complete panic. "That's not possible," she said, her voice shaking. "Robert, is this true?" She grabbed the papers from the table, flipping through them faster and faster, desperate to find some mistake. Then she looked at the signature, then the date. Her confidence disappeared in seconds. For the first time since she married my father, she had absolutely nothing to say. My father, still weak from his recovery but resolute, looked her dead in the eye. "Rachel isn't going anywhere," my father said, his voice calm but firm. "I built this house for my family. Long before I met you, I made sure it would always stay with my daughter. The only person who misunderstood whose home this is was you." Linda tried to argue, tried to accuse me of manipulating my father, tried every angle she could think of, but the documents were clear, dated years before she ever walked through our front door. In the weeks that followed, my father made a decision of his own, one that had nothing to do with revenge, but everything to do with respect. He asked Linda to move out while they worked through their marriage and counseling, giving her the chance to prove her intentions were genuine rather than financial. She didn't take that chance. Within 2 months, she filed for divorce herself, once it became clear there would be no house, no ownership, and no easy payout waiting for her. The home my father built with his own hands stayed exactly where it belonged, in our family, protected, safe. A few months later, my father was finally strong enough to work in the garden again. Together, we planted new flowers beside the place where my mother's ashes had been scattered years earlier. Standing there, I realized something. Linda had tried to take a house. She never understood that the real value wasn't in the walls or the land, it was in the memories they protected. Looking back now, I don't feel triumphant about what happened to Linda. I feel grateful. Grateful that my father protected our home years before he even knew he'd need to, and grateful that the truth had a way of surfacing exactly when it needed to. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. People can rewrite the story they tell you, but they can't rewrite the truth that's already written down, filed away, waiting quietly for its moment. My name is Rachel Turner. I almost lost the only home I had left to someone who saw it as nothing more than an asset to claim. But some things, the things built out of love, protected out of care, can't be taken just because someone demands it. They can only be given away, and I was never going to give mine away.